I'm Jolene Wynn, and this is the Porn Addict's Wife Podcast, episode number 199, Residual Pain. Hello, my lady. If you have a spouse that is struggling with a pornography problem, then you are in the right place. My name is Jolene Wynn, and I am a life coach, a member of the LDS faith, and the wife of a former porn addict. And in this podcast, I am going to teach you how to change the way that you are affected by your husband's choices. We can't change him, but what we can do is change the way that you respond when he makes the decisions that he does. I'm going to teach you how to manage your brain, how to process all of the emotions that seem so overwhelming to you so that you can finally live a life where you aren't living in fear of triggers and relapses. And by learning how to manage your mind and process your emotions, you are no longer going to be running on an emotional roller coaster, but you are going to start feeling so much more in control of your life, no matter what your husband is doing. And I'm going to teach you all of that on this podcast. I can't wait to get started with you, and I'm so glad that you are here. I promise you, you're in the right place. Hello, my ladies. Happy Monday. I hope you guys had a great weekend. I am finally feeling better. This is like the illness that just keeps going. I am starting to feel a lot better, and I went to the gym for the first time yesterday, which is my favorite. And I was working out with my personal trainer, and he was like, "All right, Joe," he called me Joe. "All right, Joe, tell me, what percentage are you? Are we at 90%? Are we at 100%? And he asked me this before we started working out. And I was like, you're going to have to wait. And I can't answer that until I start working out. And about halfway through, I told him, I was like, all right, I have your answer. It's 70 to 75%. And anyway, I just thought that was funny because I was like, how am I supposed to answer this question? I don't know. I won't know until I start actually doing it. What a silly question. Anyway, it has been so nice to be out of bed. I got to do my coaching calls this week with my clients, which are always my favorite, and they energize me and light me up and give me so much inspiration for the podcast. And that is where this is coming to you guys today. Quick calendar reminder is that I'm going to be scheduling some master classes over the next couple of months, one of which is going to be about weight loss. And so you're going to want to do that. So make sure you guys head to my website, jolenewynn.com, and sign up for my emails. That way you are the first to be notified because they have not been scheduled yet. So make sure you're signed up for my emails so that I will be sending out emails to let you know when those are so that you can join them. If you want to, there's also going to be one about money. The other thing that I wanted to let you guys know is that I have a free class that I would highly encourage you guys to take. So a couple months ago, I did this, and you guys were able to join it, but it is something that I offer right now. You can go to my website, jolenewynn.com. You'll see it on that homepage, is that I have a free class called How to Talk to Your Husband About His Pornography Problem. Again, this was a free webinar that I did. It's about a 60-minute webinar, but it's super, super good. If you are struggling with communicating with your husband about his pornography problem, then go watch this class. It's totally free. And in it, I go over the 7 most common mistakes that I see women make and how to avoid them. Okay, so if you struggle bringing it up to your husband, if you don't know how to bring it up, or you're always the one that brings it up, or every time you bring it up, you shut down emotionally, or you guys get into an argument, this is for you. I remember when my husband and we're really good about communicating about this now, but that was not always the case. For those of you guys who don't know, when my husband first told me about his pornography problem, he said, all right, I have secretly had an addiction for the last 6 years. You haven't known about it. I don't want to talk about it. I'm handling it, and I don't need help. And that was how it went. So there were several years where I would just bring it up every few months, and it would be really awkward. And I would just kind of bring up this conversation where I would say, hey, are you okay? And that was it. And it would just be really awkward and tense. And then he would either say, yeah, I'm fine, or he would then inform me of a relapse, right? So that's kind of how it went, and it was terrible. And so I want to help you guys avoid all of that. So that's what this class is all about. Again, you can go to my website, jolenewynn.com. There are 3 free resources right on the very front of that homepage if you go to that website, and this class is one of them. So click on it. Again, it's free. Go watch it, and then message me. You guys on Instagram at Jolene Wynn Coaching. You can go follow me, message me, let me know what came up for you so that I can help you with what came up for you. Okay? All right, let's talk about residual pain. Okay, this came up for me as I was talking to a client this week, and I wanted to share it with you because it's something that's very, very common with whatever it is that we're going through. When we go through something that is, shall we say, traumatic, anything that brings up a lot of negative emotion, I want to offer that sometimes it can leave a residue. Okay, so if you look up the word residue, which is not a very pleasant word in my thoughts. When I think of residue, I don't think of anything really pleasant. I think of like plaque buildup on your teeth, or I think of when the Tupperware that you tried to clean didn't really get all the way clean, and there's kind of a film on the inside of it. I know that doesn't sound very nice. That's what I want you guys to picture. That's what I'm talking about. We're talking about the residue, okay? So if you look up the definition of residue, it's a small amount of something that remains after the main part has gone or been taken or used, okay? So let's listen to that again. A residue is a small amount of something that remains after the main part has gone. Okay, and that's what I want you to think about, right? So when we think about residual, when I'm talking about residual pain, residual is just the adjective form of this word, right? So it's what remains after the greater part or quantity is gone. Okay, that's the remaining. Now, when I want you guys to think about this, when we're talking about residual pain, often when we go through, again, something that brings up a lot of negative emotion, even if we process, or most of the time we aren't processing, but even if we go through and we are able to let go of the bulk of that emotion from that experience, when you don't know how to process your emotions, there can be a residue that is left over, kind of just internally, right? Emotionally, internally. There's this emotional residue from that experience. And that can be pain, it can be bitterness, jealousy, resentment, anger, betrayal. It can be self-worthlessness. It can be whatever negative emotion there is. But what happens with residue, and this is what's fascinating, is it doesn't just sit there, it builds. And that's what happens with residual pain. We have this experience where we had a lot of negative emotion. We take care of it the way that we have normally taken care of it. We shove it down, we distract ourselves from it, we push it away, or we power through just to get through it. And we think we've taken care of it because the bulk of it is gone. But there's this residue, this film that just kind of stays. And then what happens is it starts to increase. That residue, that residual pain starts to build up again. Okay, think of like a fungus. This is a terrible visual. This is so gross, but this is what's coming to my mind. Okay, so think of it like a fungus, like a bacteria, right? That's what it is. Think of that residue that's left over. It starts to grow something even more nasty, and it starts to build up. And I'm gonna give some examples so that we know what this means. Okay, but that's what happens when we don't actually process the whole emotion from the experience. When we just power through, when we just shove it down and get through the day, then there is that left over that then over time starts to build up and fester, and it comes back to the surface. Okay, let's do some examples. The first example that I thought of when I was thinking about this was how sometimes when we have something like that, what we can tend to do with this residual pain is we then project it onto other people. Okay, again, I'm going to go through an example in a minute. This is why this residual pain is such a problem. Number one is because we will project it onto other people. So let's do an example. Okay, so let's say when you were younger, you had a terrible experience at the dentist. My husband knows about that. He's a dentist, right? So let's say you had a terrible experience at the dentist. Well, if you have some residual pain from that experience emotionally, not physically, then even years down the road, you can project that onto all dentists. Okay, this has happened so much. You guys probably, half of you, I'm sure, are resonating with this. You're like, oh my gosh, that's totally me. I had the worst dentist as a kid, and now I just hate all dentists, right? You take the pain from that one experience and you project it onto an entire group of individuals who are completely unrelated to your initial experience. Does this make sense? You take that residual pain, that pain that we haven't fully processed, that we haven't completely let go. Maybe we've let go of the bulk of it, but that residue that was left over has now gathered fungus and has grown. And now we are projecting that emotion onto the entire group. Now, this makes complete sense because this is exactly how our brain is designed to work. Our brain is designed to look for red flags, right? To keep us alive. That's what our brain does, okay? We need to keep alive. The last time we went to the dentist, it was terrible. We had a horrible negative emotion. We don't want to experience that again, so we should project that onto all other dentists. It's a big red flag. Dentists are big red flags, and that's what our brain is doing, okay? It's trying to keep us alive, okay? But the problem is that we still have that residue from that initial experience that we haven't processed yet. And this is one of the ways that we are seeing it become a problem in our life. Right? It might, and now that's a silly example with the dentist, and yet it's not, because when we have something like that, then we create a lot of anxiety around being around that group of people. I see this a lot with women who have a significantly traumatic experience with a man, right? Whether that was their spouse or somebody different. If they had a terrible experience with a man, then they might not feel comfortable around men. Their brain is doing the exact same thing as the dentist example, okay? This is what happens when you have a traumatic experience that hasn't been processed. It leaves a residue and it starts to build up, right? And so now then they take that pain and they project it onto the entire group. So rather than it just being about one man who you had this terrible experience with, now we've projected that onto all men, right? It's like all men are untrustworthy, right? Because I had this one experience with this one man, or maybe a lot of experiences with this one person, this one man who I decided was untrustworthy, and maybe he totally was, then our brain says, now I'm taking that pain and that kind of finality, that determination that men are untrustworthy, we're going to take it from that one guy, and it's not just this guy is untrustworthy, it's all men. We take that pain and we project it outward to the entire group. Kind of the same thing with dentists. It's like, I know I didn't just have a bad experience with this one dentist, now I don't like any dentists. Did you guys see this? So again, this is just one example of how residual pain can build up over time and start leaving very real effects, start having very real effects in our lives. Does that make sense? And it can harm not only yourself, but also your potential relationships. When you don't allow yourself to heal from the pain of the past, then it takes it and projects it into the future. So let's do this with your marriage, right? So you have had a lot of negative emotion with your spouse, him being someone who struggles with pornography. There's been lies, there's been distrust, all of these things. And now your brain is taking that pain from the past, that residual leftover pain that's just kind of built up, this film, and it's projecting it onto your future husband, right? Who he is now, your present husband, and who he is going to be, right? So you might be taking the pain of the past, him as a past husband, the one who lied to you, that husband was untrustworthy. And now your brain is saying who he is now is also untrustworthy. It's the same cycle. It is the same process in your brain. So our brain not dealing, when we don't process that emotional pain, that residual pain from the past, then what happens is it starts to crumble our current relationships. We'll even do this with our kids, especially as they start to get older, right? They might have done something in the past that we think that they are now untrustworthy, especially if you have teenagers. Maybe they didn't listen once, or they lied to you about something, they're untrustworthy, and then you start to project that onto them in the future. It's a little bit different because you are their parent and your job is to parent them differently than an adult-adult relationship, but same idea, okay? Does that make sense? This is just one of the ways that residual pain is a problem when it's not addressed specifically and handled and processed in a healthy way. Obviously, another way that this is a problem, the second way that this is a huge problem, the main way that I see, is that this just starts to build up and decrease our emotional capacity, right? We all think of yourself as like having an empty bucket inside of you. And it's like, all right, on a scale of 1 to 10, I have, am I at 10 for my emotional capacity? If our bucket is completely empty, we're at full emotional capacity. I can take on anything emotionally today. Most of the time, we don't start with an empty bucket, especially when we have a lot of residual pain. Then we're starting already at like an 8. We're already full almost 100%. We can't take in as much emotion as we normally could because we are carrying around, this is why it's called emotional baggage. The emotion that we are storing inside of us because of all of that residual pain that we haven't processed yet has compounded. And so now we have decreased the capacity to take more in our regular day-to-day life. And when that happens, this is what ends up giving us a very short fuse. Okay, this is when we lash out at the stranger at the grocery store for cutting in line. This is when we start yelling at our kids more and more than we want to, and we know we shouldn't, and we know we don't want to, and yet we don't know how to stop it. We can hear ourselves yelling, and yet we don't know what's going on or why we're at our max. We just know we hit our max and we start yelling. Okay. Or maybe this is when you pick arguments with your husband on purpose, right? And you're like, I don't know why I do this, but every time he comes home, I just start nitpicking about all the things that he hasn't done for me during the day, right? We have reached our emotional max because we're carrying around all of this emotional baggage, all of this residue from past experiences that hasn't been fully processed. And it might be the thing, here's what's fascinating is we think, oh, that's not that big a deal. The bulk of it's gone. I'll deal with it later, or I'm just making too big a deal of it, or it's not really that big of a problem. But when you stack all of those not that big of a problems on top of each other, that's when we reach our max capacity emotionally, right? So we take maybe, the residue from the time that he lied about having a relapse when you guys were together that one anniversary weekend, and we take the residue from when you felt some distrust when he was on his phone last week. And we take the residue from when you had that argument that one time and he brought up something that you felt like was unfair and you have a little bit of bitterness left over. And we stack all of those on top of each other, and it ends up being this heavy weight that we carry around that's right at the surface that decreases our emotional capacity to take anything else in throughout the day. And it's very easily triggered, right? And this is another thing, and this brings me to number 3. What happens is we also get triggered, okay? This third primary reason why it's so important to get rid of and process through all of that residue, which is possible, you just have to learn how to do it, is because otherwise we end up getting triggered. I've talked about triggers a lot. There's several podcast episodes on triggers. You guys can go back and listen to all of them, and I highly recommend that you do. Because what happens is a trigger is literally just something neutral outside of us. It is just a circumstance, a situation, a person, something that is completely innocent. And the problem with it is that it triggers an emotion inside of us. That's part of that residue, right? That residual pain that's left over is getting triggered. And when we don't actually deal with that emotional pain, when we don't clear that out, when we don't clean that up and process it and let it go, then it's still going to be there. And we have to live with the consequence of that. Does that make sense? Now, our brain thinks that the consequence of that is because of the other person. The reason that I get triggered when he sits on his phone, the reason I get triggered when he goes to the bathroom by himself, the reason I get triggered when he wants to go to the beach or there's a beach trip as a family, the reason I get triggered when an attractive woman walks by isn't my fault. It's because of what he did. No, it's because of the residue of what he did. It's because you were affected by what he did, and yet we haven't fully cleaned it up. And so you're carrying around this residual pain that keeps getting triggered. And unless, ladies, you clean that up, it's going to keep happening. But the good news is that cleaning that up is entirely within your control. This is the best news I could give you because it's all internal. That residual pain that you're feeling that keeps getting triggered all over the place, left and right, is within your control. That's emotional. It's all internal. And anything internal, ladies, is within your ability to control. This is the most empowering thing that I could teach you. This means, no, we can't control him. No, we can't change him. No, we can't change what he did in the past, but we can change how it continues to affect you in the future. That is entirely up to you. And this is one of the biggest ways. When we have that residual pain, it keeps getting triggered by circumstances outside of us, and that's going to keep happening unless you learn how to process your emotion. And what that looks like is you go back in and you purposefully scrape through and experience that leftover pain, that residual pain. We figure out why you're still holding on to it, because our brain always has a reason. We figure out what thought patterns are holding that residual pain there. We retrain your brain to create new thought patterns to let go of that residual pain, and we process it, which is an actual skill. and you learn how to process it, feel it, and let it go. This is like bleach, okay? If you're thinking of that really nasty Tupperware that didn't quite get clean, this is the bleach. This is the thing that's going to come through and actually kill and disinfect and completely wipe it out and make it like new. This is like a magic eraser, okay? Where it takes everything. I don't even understand what's in a magic eraser, but it really is magic, right? That's what it is. This is the thing that's going to completely wipe it clean. That's what this process is. And this is the process that I teach my clients all day, every day inside my coaching program. How to retrain your brain, how to manage your emotions, how to process your emotions so that you don't have to live with this residual pain. You already went through it once, ladies. You don't need to keep it with you, okay? If you're ready to let it go, if you are ready to live a life without this residual pain, come join me. And I will teach you how to do it. You can schedule a one-on-one consultation call with me. Go to my website. There's a link right there. You can schedule that call with me. You and I will get on the phone call. We'll figure out exactly where you're stuck. We will talk about how you can actually go through it, how you can get past it, and make sure that this is the right fit for you and you can start going forward today. Because again, everything that you went through is real and it happened, but it doesn't need to keep happening over and over and over. And if it is, then I want to offer that you come work with me. I will teach you all the skills that you need to know to finally let it go. All right, ladies, don't live with residual pain. Your life was already painful enough. We don't need to keep the pain with you. I love you, ladies, so much. I'll talk to you next week in a brand new episode. So take care. All right, ladies, it's time to rise up and take charge of your healing, and I have the best way for you to do it. I have created a lifetime access coaching program that I have designed specifically for you and exactly what you're going through right now. This is where I help you develop a personal mastery of all the tools that you're learning here on the podcast in order for you to create a permanent change. Go to my website, jolenewynn.com. You will find all the information there and you can sign up today and we will start going forward. I can't wait to see you there.